Either, yeah.
As ready as we can be.
I guess we can be. Good evening. We are at Cotsen Institute at UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. And me and my colleague Marius Alexiano, we are here in order to present. We have presented a SALT conference at your university in the framework of our current research project on salt, Ethnosalero, the ethnoarchaeology of salt sources and salt mountains in eastern and extra-Carpathian area. And we have the honor to meet Professor Giorgio Buccellati, the former director of the Cotsen Institute, the personality who worked almost his entire life excavating in Syria, and who kindly shared with us his unpublished material on the fragments of briquetage. He's one of the first persons that dealing with briquetage in that area. And we are honored that he accepted to be taped by our director of project, Marius Alexiano, and we would like to ask him to present us the fragments of briquetage and to give his interpretation on this material.
Yeah, I am no expert at all in salt matters, but I was very interested in the possibility that some ceramic material that we had been excavating in Syria might have something to do with salt. And the reason why I first thought of it was because of a suggestion that a salt expert made after seeing some of these sherds. It was Beatrice Hopkinson, who had worked in England a lot on salt, and she suggested that this kind of ceramic that we had been excavating at a proto-literate, so proto-historic site in Syria was very similar to the briquetage that she knew from Europe. And so she suggested that it might perhaps have been used for that purpose, for producing salt. I was interested because this kind of vessel is a very well-known and problematic vessel. It's called the beveled rim bowl. This is a beveled rim bowl that's broken. It's just a sherd. And it's very well known because there are hundreds, in fact thousands of them in many sites. Only in a period of a few centuries, around 3500 BC. They have a very characteristic shape. This is the base, the rim, and the rim is beveled. That's why they're called simply beveled rim bowl. They are very similar in shape, although not all exactly the same. And they were made on a mold so that they could be made in great quantities. So they've been really a mystery. It's one of those characteristic pieces of pottery where there are almost as many interpretations as there are sherds. So the idea of salt was intriguing to me. I then thought that we might try with the B. Hopkinson an experiment. So we did go to the place where we had excavated them, and we made this experiment. The place is called Greia, which means little village actually in Arabic, and it's on the Euphrates, and not far from it there are in fact some salt playas that are still being, harvested today. I don't know today, but they were at the time, 20 years ago, when we did this experiment. It's one of three large areas. The largest one is in the Jabul near Aleppo, and the smaller one is near Palmyra. This one is kind of a medium-sized one, and it's called Bouara. It's the name of the playa itself. It's about maybe an hour and a half drive from the site where these things were found. The site itself then is on the Euphrates, and it is a village, a small town of that period, 3500 BC. So we did go also to Bouara, which is way out in the desert and totally uninhabited, but except for when there is a salt harvesting season. It's very near the Iraqi border. So we drove to the salt playa, but then we also primarily did the experiment in our dig house at the site where we were digging at the time, which was on the Euphrates. It's called Terca. It's only about 5 kilometers from Greia, which is the site where these things were found. And it's a little later. It begins around 3000 BC. So Greia is the village perhaps from which the people came who established this city of Terca. So the experiment consisted of, it was totally designed by B. Hopkinson, and she's the one who organized the whole thing. I, as I say, don't know anything about salt. So the experiment, though, seemed to me very successful, and it consisted of these series of steps. We brought the salt from the Bouara playa, which is, the salt itself was very dirty. It just came up from the ground. And it was easier at a certain season in the late spring when there is more water that's coming. But the water is actually not from the rain because it's really desert. It's really from the ground. There is some sort of a sulfuric, I guess. I don't know what kind of water. But anyway, it was not drinking water that came up from the ground, which is also true, of course, in Palmyra and the Jabul, because you need water to produce brine, I guess. So we brought 2 or 3 large bags of salt to the house, which is on the Euphrates, so there was a lot of water there. And then there's also something else in the river that I'll mention later that made the whole hypothesis even more plausible. We put first the water in, what we tried to do was to utilize all the elements that were in the inventory of the vessels found in Greia. So the starting moment was to use the large, very large jars, about 50 or so centimeters in height. And we only have this very small fragment here. They had the spout on the shoulder. So if this is the profile of the jar, the spout would have been here. This is really not very indicative. But the reason why it was significant, it's because as a result of this first stage, the impurities, the larger impurities, fell to the bottom of the jar. And the position of the spout was perfect for pouring out the top part, which was with less, it wasn't pure yet, but there were less impurities. Less thing. After that, it was put in bowls, in the shallow bowls or platters, really, like these 3, of which again we had quite a large number there. And at that point it was put on the fire. We put it on the fire. We assumed that that's what they were doing in antiquity. Also because at the site we found quite a number of round discs that were perforated and were burnt, which we assume were grills. We have this here, but this is not a grill. This is something. It's a sieve. But the idea was similar. It was really a large, except it was larger. It was flat. It was thicker, and it was burnt. So we assume that the grill was placed on the fire. Let's say like this, assuming that this is a grill, and then on top we put the platters with the slightly purer brine in it. With the fire, what happened, it was a magical moment really, where suddenly, it was a matter of seconds really, where the water turned to crystal, the top part of the brine. And at that point we scooped it out with ladles or large spoons, but there's between spoons, which are also part of the inventory, in clay. All of this was clay. And we scooped out this crystal and put it in the beveling bowls. We tried to put it in several ones. And we used the authentic pieces, obviously. And we put these on the edges of the grill because the fire was less intense. Now, the fire, we just used gas. So obviously they didn't have it in antiquity, but we thought that that variable did not really matter. Clearly there was some kind of fire underneath. The bowls then remained, I forget how long they stayed on the fire, but not too long. I think it was about 2-3 hours, something like this. And they were on the side of the fire. And the salt that was in it essiccated completely, dried out completely, and became a salt cake, really, inside the bowl itself. So we assumed that that was a very logical explanation. And now there are a couple of extra comments to be made. One is that the bowls are in enormous quantities. I mean, we had literally, I think, thousands of sherds. I don't know exactly how many bowls, but which didn't make much sense for a small village in on the Euphrates. It was a relatively, we don't have the extent of the settlement, but certainly it was not a city. So why would they have this almost industrial production of bowls in a place like that? The other strange thing was then that if they had to ship these bowls with salt in it to the other cities, which were primarily in the north at some distance, a good 5 hours by car today, so it was a few days by donkey. Why would they ship them in these bowls, which increase the weight and therefore the cost of shipping? And we do find these in the north, in these cities in the north. We find exactly the same kind of vessels, exactly like this, at this distance in the north. But why would they put them in that? And we didn't quite have an answer. The answer came the following year, and I'll come to that in a minute. But before, I wanted to also suggest another thing. The one reason for producing salt in this location was also to send fish to the north, because the Euphrates has a lot of fish. It did anyway, there's less now. In the north, instead, they're out of the large river valleys, and so there were no fish, really. There was no fish. And so the salt would have been a perfect way to send this fish all the way up the north. But the question still remained, how and why would they send these things? Would they send the salt in this is heavy, rather than in bags, for instance? So the answer came to us the following year, very unexpectedly. Alongside the production of the salt cakes in the beveled rim bowls, we had also made the same thing in two other types of vessels, some aluminum bowls from the kitchen of the same size, and then some other pottery, also ancient, although slightly later, 2,000 years later, but still BC, which however was not of this type, was not porous, was not with the heavy temper that we see in this. And we brought then all three up north. That is, the salt cake, salt in here, the salt in the rim, in the aluminum, and in the normal pottery. North, because by that time we were already excavating another site in the north precisely, which would have been one of the cities that would have received this salt. And we just put it on our shelves there to keep. When we came back the following summer, we were really surprised because the salt cake in the aluminum theme had become like a rock. It was really impossible to use. The one in the normal pottery was even worse because the ceramic had eroded. There was a great deal of corrosion, really, and the salt was all mixed in with fragments of ceramics. Whereas the salt in the beveling bowl was exactly as we had left it. So it really appears that it was a perfect packaging, also for shipping, and that it was worth the cost of the extra weight to ship it up north. The final thing that was also interesting was this, that many of these sherds have a vertical fracture. You see, like this. This is the base, and this is the rim, and this is the break, and this is the break also. There are fewer that are broken this way, which is a bit an unusual kind of breakage pattern. You can also see most of these are of this type. And in some of them, we noticed that there were what appeared to be traces of a pick mark on the base. So we assumed that it was being opened by breaking the thing, and it opened. And you were talking before about the problem of adherence to the wall of the pot. Apparently we didn't have that problem because it came off easy. So presumably the way this, I don't know, or whether it's because it was very porous, because of the nature of the surface or what, but there was no problem in getting the salt cake out for us and for the ancients. Unfortunately, we have not published this, and I hope that we might be able, with your help, I have to find B, because she's the real expert. She should take all the credit for it.
Well, thank you very much, and for this wonderful experience with salt. At the beginning, you said that you had basically no idea about salt, but here you are telling us so many things about salt. So we are very honored if we will continue this collaboration, and you will try to publish in the proceedings of the first International Congress on Anthropology of Salt this wonderful subject with Beatrice Harkness.
Wonderful, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
6 minuti.
Ecco. So the pictures that we have are the ones of the trip from the place where the salt playas are, which are these. And the name is Bouara. And they were already harvesting the raw salt. This is B. Hopkinson from the back, seen from behind. It's a very isolated place near the Iraqi border and in the area of the resort. And there is quite a bit of water, which makes it possible for the salt then to be scooped up. So that's the first batch. Then we brought this salt to make the experiment, and here we see the full sequence. This is the salt in a basket. There was brought from Bouara. This is the first decantation of the brine in a jar which is modern, because we didn't have a complete one, an ancient, we just have the sherd of the spout. Then we put it in a shallow bowl or a large platter. Again, this is modern and this is a fragment of the ancient one. And then we put it on the fire this is actually in the original bevel ring bowls, because we had lots of these, plus also a modern one. So this is the full sequence, and here are other views of the same thing.
Okay.
Okay. Then we displayed. No, first I'll show you the details. Here are some details then of the brine in the jar, which is put on the. Actually, this is the wrong sequence, because from here it should actually go. Yeah, this is the sequence. From the jar, it was placed in the platter, and then from the platter with a spoon, when we have ancient spoons, although here we use the modern one, in the bevel ring bowl. And this is a sherd of the type of platter that would have been used back then. This also is modern, but we found exactly the same kind of grill at the site itself. The fire was just that of gas, because the main thing was simply that there was fire. It didn't matter how it was produced.
2 minutes yet.
Okay. Then this one is a indication of how the sedimentation went to the bottom, showing in the transparent one. And then here is again the sequence, with this one going into the spout being precisely at this spot, which is the same place where we have the other one of the ancient one. So at that point, this is the full sequence again, with Euphrates in the background. We are on the shore of the Euphrates, and these are the 5 steps.
Okay.
Then this is the result, with the salt cake in a variety of containers, including the bevel ring bowls themselves, and also in an aluminum one, and in normal pottery.
Finished.
Finished. Okay. Well, we can do another one. Okay. So we have these, and then this shows the breaking and you see that the cake comes out perfectly well. This is the cake that we had made, and we broke it the way we assumed the ancients broke it.